Hey everybody, it's Dan, and it's that time once more to go around the world one more time and have a beer or two along the way. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us this week. I gotta say thank you first of all to Rod and also Don for coming on the show last week. It's pretty amazing what this man who has absolutely no vision whatsoever can do making beer, and it's really cool that his partner is there to help him along the way to make sure one, he doesn't burn the place down, two, he doesn't blow himself up, burn himself, and three, they're there to ensure and to ensure they both enjoy the experience of making homebrew together. So this is really, really cool. Fantastic people. If anyone has any information on adaptive equipment for visually impaired, be it a talking hydrometer, a talking thermometer, anything like that that could help someone who is visually impaired to make beer, please let me know at myadventuresinhomebrewing@gmail.com so I can forward these on to these fantastic people, because not only am I friends with Rod, who makes beer, but also the blind brew guy, Fred Coleman. He's also visually impaired, and this would also help him out. So guys, let's band together here a little bit in our great little homebrew community and help our friends out. So this week, we're really fortunate because we're going to go back home to where I grew up, down around St. John, New Brunswick, and talk to some really cool guys. We're going to talk to Christian and Derek from the Community Brew Shop, and we'll see what they're up to. But until then, give me a couple of minutes and we're going to talk to the guys from Escarpment Laboratories. Hey, and we're back. And as you can see on the screen, they've been here like the whole time. We've got Christian down low and we got Derek up top. It may be a little different on their screen, so bear with me, guys. And these are the fantastic guys that had me on their show talking about my adventure in homebrewing and how I got started and things like that. Now it's my turn to return the favor, because I like to give these guys a little bit more traction, because these guys are absolutely phenomenal, especially, well, they're Maritimers and we're all cool people. So boys, thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no worries. For having us.
Hey, no problem. Anytime a Maritimer can have another Maritimer out, why not? You know, we got to stick together.
Yeah, for sure.
So you guys have started your shop, and in our little talk beforehand, Derek was saying you guys only started this about a year ago now. So based on that, how about we'll start with Derek, because he was in first. Christian, I'm sorry.
No problem.
We'll start with Derek, and we'll get a little bit about yourself and your experience with homebrewing, and then we'll roll down into Christian, and then I'll let you two riff off each other to tell us about how you got started and what actually inspired you guys to do this.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I've been homebrewing now kind of on and off for a while, probably since about 2001, I guess. I started, when I was going to university, much like several other homebrewers, and you struggle along, try to save some money, and you make those crappy kits that you can't seem to work with very well. So I did that for a while, then actually started making wine because I found the beer was just not worth doing. So I switched over to wine for a while with my my carboy and my bucket, that kind of thing. And after I kind of did that for a while, I just put it all away, and I took a bit of a break. And then when I got back into it, really was, I would say probably about 6, maybe 7 years ago, when I started to realize that, the equipment was better. I did a little more research. I'd always been a long time beer fan, whether it's, in my travels, I always seek out unique places, that kind of thing. Or even on my local shelf, I always try to buy something, imported or whatever to try. Whereas most of my friends were stuck in the macro lager kind of loop. So I was always experimental. So when I started to research beer and get to know about it a little bit more, I really got more into the homebrewing side of things, and decided finally that, I'm going to invest a little bit of money. I borrowed some equipment from a friend to start with to do some all grain batches. And then I just kind of converted over into that. And that's where I am now, I guess. So Christian and I brew a lot together on a larger system. We usually do 10-gallon batches.
Nice.
We can do up to 15 if we need to. And we also just got a Brewzilla just to try it out and see how that goes. We've had a lot of success with that as well. So that's kind of where we are now with our home brewing. I guess to boil it down, I guess the styles we brew are very historical, or the ones that I prefer to brew. Christian's a little bit more experimental, but I like to do the historical. I like to research the beer, go back and look to see, how it was brewed 100 years ago and try to replicate those kind of things. So I
Okay.
guess that's me and my brewing in a nutshell, I guess.
If you're a historical beer guy, I'll send you a recipe. You'll knock your socks off.
Okay, perfect.
All right. All right, my friend, you're up.
Yeah, so my name's Christian. I'm Derek's partner in crime on our little home brewing adventure. So I am much newer to the hobby than Derek is. I actually only got started in it a few years ago, maybe just about a year or so, maybe a little bit more a year before Derek and I started the shop. So Derek and I are, just haven't been friends for that long in the grand scheme of things. When we're, we say we're both approaching kind of 40 years old. We met at the gym, and Derek used to have a little kind of beer tour business around some of the local breweries and stuff like that, and he needed someone to help him out. And I've always been interested in beer. Was a big rugby player here in the city, and the club here has a long tradition with Labatt's Brewery. So I've gone on the beer tours, and I've been down to the Keith's Room and all that stuff. And I've always kind of had this kind of adjacent interest in beer, but never on the home brewing side really. And then when I started to do maybe 4 or 5 years ago, started to do these beer tours with Derek and learn more about craft beer and the scene around that. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. We started brewing just kind of off and on, just kind of having some fun with a stovetop kit. And then we were buying from a local gentleman here out in KV, in the valley, just outside of the city. And unfortunately, due to health reasons, he had to close his shop down. And right around the time that he closed, we were starting to get into brewing together pretty seriously. So we had bought this, as Derek mentioned, this big 23-gallon kettle, or 23-gallon kettle, so we could do bigger batches. And Derek bought a couple pumps, and we started, putting ball locks and quick connects and kind of really outfitting our gear to make more of certainly not a professional setup, but a setup that we could be proud of. And so while Derek, as he mentioned, likes to brew traditional, mostly European styles, because that's where his family's from, I'm much more experimental because this is just so kind of new and fun for me at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I've made like peanut butter porter. I've done Cadbury cream egg stout.
Really?
Well, it didn't turn out that well, but it was a fun little experiment. So I like to play with, some of the more common adjuncts for modern beer styles. So vanilla, coffee. I like to do a lot of stuff with fruit when I can. And I really Derek always cringes, I'm sure, when I say this, but I liked IPAs before it was cool to like IPAs. So now that I'm home brewing, I'm always using, we brought in Galaxy hops at the shop, and we brought in Citra and a lot of those big, heavy kind of dank hops, because that's what I like to play around with. So we're kind of a fun pair like that, because when customers come to us and ask for recipe advice, while I will grant that Derek does most of our recipes, he's been doing it a lot longer than me. But I've got a little bit more recent experience with those new modern styles, if you will. And then Derek's much better with the traditional English styles, European styles, Belgian, stuff like that. So we got started, like I said, just a little while ago. I borrowed a handful of books and did as much research as I can. And now we're in business together. So it works out really well.
So you know enough to be dangerous.
Exactly. I know enough to be dangerous. And I come from a sales background. I've been in sales since 2004, sales management, bouncing back and forth with a couple companies. So it's great that way, especially for the business, because Derek does a lot of our inventory management, a lot of ordering. He's really up on trends on what grains are popular, what hops are popular. He's great at sourcing things because he's been doing this for so long. And I manage the website and the social media channels, and liaison with customers on the phone and stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome. So is the shop do you have a storefront, or is it all online?
Right now, it is only online.
Okay.
As Derek mentioned, we started this during the pandemic. Our local shop closed down about a year before we went into all this lockdown stuff, and there was kind of some stories floating around that someone might be purchasing the interest in it and keeping it going, sort of thing. And we let it sit for 8, 9, 10 months, and just nothing ever came of it. So we were like, well, we're spending a lot of money, we want to do this more seriously. So we made some contacts with BSG and some other suppliers, and we just kind of started rolling with it. But because of the pandemic, we were like, I've got a little bit of web development experience, just mostly as a hobby, but I could get us going that way. So we rent a a secure, kind of very clean sanitary storage locker where we keep all our grain and kind of our adjunct products like our biofine and our different chemicals and things like that. And then we grabbed a couple refrigerators and all the cold stuff. I have a basement here in my house that I don't use, so all of our cold stuff just stays here with me so that it's all sealed properly and we can offer the highest quality to our customers without the storefront. So we're making it work, I think.
So are you finding that a lot of people, at least in the community down home, are embracing you guys? Are you finding that there's people asking really good questions about stuff, or are they just coming in and saying, just hook me up and pray to God it works?
I'll let Derek take this one because he does a lot of our recipes and we get a lot of requests to build recipes. So.
All right.
Yeah, so I would say we've had tremendous support from the community, and there's been a lot of new interest as well, especially during the pandemic with people being at home and that kind of thing. People saying, can you make me this clone beer of something that I tried? It's a craft beer. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll try to develop clones. I mean, we don't go right to the breweries and ask for the recipe unless we can find it somewhere. But we try our best to make a beer that's, if we know the hops they're using, the typical grain bill for that, that's where kind of the historical background that I have is good. And Christian has a good knowledge of the, newer style hops. So a lot of times we can kind of develop a similar recipe. I mean, you're never going to get it the same as a microbrewery, but it's similar. So we have had a lot of support from the community, like even that, and our friends, coming over and loving our beer that we make and share, that kind of thing. We also do a loaner program, kind of like when you used to rent the old video game systems at the corner store. You can borrow our gear for a $20 deposit, and we'll set you up. We got a whole instruction manual how to use it and that kind of thing, and that's been actually pretty successful as well. So with that usually comes a customized recipe. So we usually ask people what they want to brew, and we'll try to develop a recipe, something that they would like, and we're there as as they brew for technical support, anything like that. They call us on the phone and we can walk them through a step if they're stuck or whatever it is. So it's been good support. We've actually seen a lot of people migrate with that loaner program into being more regular customers, that kind of thing. So they've been very supportive of our business since we started, for sure.
Well, right on. So being the maritimer I am, I've got to ask this: how many people have asked for recipes that resemble Alpine and Schooner? There's going to be people out there asking for those two beers.
I'm an old Schooner drinker, so
I know,
right? I know.
No,
I haven't told Derek this yet. I've been working on a secret Schooner clone recipe in my darkest moments, let me tell you. But we haven't actually, to be honest with you, the people that have been interested, especially the people that have been interested in the loaner gear, definitely have that craft beer buzz about them, that craft beer edge. That we do get a lot of requests for traditional styles. Derek's got a great red recipe for a traditional English style that customer's actually been a repeat. He's got the loaner gear a couple times. We don't even charge him a deposit anymore because we've seen him a couple times. So we have had requests for some traditional styles, but far and away we get requested for IPAs the most. So we do some all grain kits that Derek developed the recipe, and I worked on some packaging and stuff like that. And we do have kind of our own customized kits that all feature a local ingredient to kind of let them stand out from some of the more established commercial kits. And because of the amount of requests that we've gotten for IPAs, Derek's working on 5 new kits to add to our lineup that are all kind of variations: West Coast, East Coast, traditional English, a citrus kind of style, because that's, right now, whether it's trendy or whether it stays, that's what people want to brew. So we're here to try and support them.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I have seen is a lot of people gravitating towards the hophead side, going towards a lot of hoppy beers, going towards the IPAs and things like that. And while I get it, but there's only so much of an IPA someone can take. I mean, I'm like Derek. I like doing the traditional beers. I like doing historical stuff, but I like screwing around with stuff as well. I mean, I've made a s'mores stout. I think tomorrow is actually brew day. I'm going to be doing a full-on Baltic porter, and then
nice.
Then
that's actually next on my agenda. I'm going to do one this week as well.
Oh yeah, I'll send you my recipe and see what you think.
Okay, yeah, I'd like
And
to see that.
then I'm going to be doing a Russian Imperial and throwing it inside of a 5-gallon bourbon barrel once it's all fermented out.
Oh
So,
wow,
so
nice.
I understand what you're saying, but what are some of the craziest questions you get from customers? Are they asking you, so this will be ready in a week? Will this be ready in 5 days? How do I get the bubbles in it? Because those are some of the questions I actually have gotten on brew days when I've had people over and they're like, all right, so it's done. So it's alcohol now, right? And I'm like, no, you still have to ferment it. Like, well, how do you ferment it? I go, do you see those vessels over there? Yeah, it's going to go in there. We're going to add yeast and we're going to go from there. I mean, there are a lot of, I'm not going to say stupid questions, but there are a lot of questions that you got to scratch your head at. So what are some of the crazy questions you guys have had?
I don't know. Derek wrote our step-by-step manual for the loaner program, and I mean, you got to see this thing. It's, hardcover. There's tabs, there's pictures, there's
Wow.
warnings. It's very, very extensive. So, I don't think I've had any like real wild questions. I mean, we've been very fortunate that the people that have come to us for business and for advice or whatever, at least have done a little bit of research themselves, which makes it
Mm-hmm.
great for us as business owners because it shows that they've got a little bit of skin in the game. So we often get questions around more so some of the advanced products we carry, we have the Escarpment Labs Lactic Magic yeast, which is it's a great product. Derek brought it in,
Oh,
did all the research on it, and but there's almost like a secondary component to brewing with that, right? So
yeah.
we've had questions around that, and some questions around fruit. But I mean, Derek can speak to the recipes, but we most of our questions are around, I like this beer, or my wife likes this beer. Like, how do I replicate that? So,
Right.
I'll let Derek speak to that.
Yeah, so like if we're starting with a new customer, and the great thing is like if you call the store number, you get Christian. So we're right there to kind of go back and forth. But if it's a new customer, a lot of times we'll try to steer them towards a more simple recipe, even if they're trying to go extensive. Like I'm sure you've experienced it too. Like you brew your first pale ale, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I want to brew this like chocolate tiramisu milkshake stout or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to steer people away from that for their first brew. So we try to keep it fairly simple with their first one. So if the questions come up, it'll be brewing related more so than, what do I do at this point? Because I'm really confused. So like our manual that comes with the loaner program, it's for a very, I would say, not a basic beer, because a basic beer can be awesome, but it's mainly geared towards those simple like recipes. So as far as the questions we get, they're usually about like a step in the process. But yeah, we've had questions as well, like, okay, you have people text you. I work a night shift, so you'll have a guy text you at like 2:30 in the morning, and he's like, when can I drink my beer? I just finished brewing. I'm like, oh man, that's a long brew day. And
Wow.
I'm like, well, you got to give it a couple weeks now. Just let it kind of ferment and do its thing. So the fermentation, I find, is actually one of the biggest things that people don't really have a good grasp on. Like you can follow the process that is written out in the manual we have, or any step-by-step process on your equipment, but it's really the fermentation that people, they get a little bit squirrely because you have to wait for it. So it's they get a little sensitive when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I would say most of the questions we get are probably in the fermentation stage, not so much the mash in or temperatures of water, that kind of thing, because anyone can pretty much figure that out. It's just that final stage, I find, is where a lot of the questions kind of originate from.
Yeah, I find that people kind of like the same thing. They have a tendency to go from, yeah, I've made this great smash beer. So people who are just tuning in, who don't know what a smash beer, smash is single malt, single hop. And that is the best way to start. And then they're like, okay, we've done this. Let's go on to the most advanced thing we can possibly think of. How hard can it be? And in my opinion, the hardest thing out there to do is a decoction mash brew day. I will
Yeah.
not touch that with a 10-foot barge pole, just because I know it's beyond my capabilities. And I really don't have any desire to even try and go there, because the idea of having to take out part of the mash, put it inside of another pot, let it do its thing, get the other one going, then add it in at another point. I mean, that's, to be honest, that's one too many steps. It's just one too many steps. It's not because I'm lazy. It's just because I'm old and I don't have time.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is too, I guess, when you look at most of the ingredients nowadays, I mean, they're so well modified, like some of those processes are kind of obsolete unless you're trying to make, a super historical beer. Like I've done a couple experiments like that as well, like with baking the mash and then remashing it in like you would in like the traditional, like Lithuanian styles, that kind of thing. And really at the end of the day, the beer tastes great, but it's like, was this worth it? It took me, 9 hours instead of 5.5 to make this beer. And now my kitchen's a mess and all that other stuff. So I get it, but yeah, people kind of jump the gun. I find a lot of new brewers, especially they, like you said, they get one good one under their belt and then they're trying to get into something else.
Exactly. And I don't think people really understand. You're going to have some great days and then you're going to have some really, I can't believe I'm dumping a bucket worth of beer down the drain just because either it's gotten infected, it's oxidized, or just something went wrong. And when it comes time when you think it's done fermenting out, you get a whiff of it and it doesn't smell right. There's always that chance that something's going to go wrong. And unfortunately, I find people also assume that, well, it couldn't have been me. It's not the equipment. It's not the materials. It's the person putting everything together that if you miss, I hate to say it, but I need people to understand when you're making beer, stick to your recipe. Don't deviate. When it says there, it's laid out in steps. Follow your steps. And I find that some people are like, well, I don't need that. Or I get questions, why do I need to follow the steps? Well, the steps are there for a reason. It's like if you're baking a cake, you're not going to say, I don't need to add in eggs or I don't need to add milk. You need those things. Are you finding that people are saying, well, why do I need this? Why should I do this? Or even for things like sanitation, they think, why do I need that? I'll just blast it with bleach or something.
Yeah, I guess we do get some questions like that. More of the probably more of because of the book that we have, especially in the loaner program, or that we've emailed to people with questions, because it's so detailed, we get more of a question of like the sanitation one's pretty simple. Everyone knows you got to have clean gear, and it's outlined very. We make a huge point of stressing that to customers, and we outline it as much as we can. So I think most of the questions we get are, what does this step do for my beer? So like, why do I sparge? Why can't I just fill the bucket with water, fill the cooler with water? We have a modified Coleman cooler for a mash tun that we blend out. So it's like, you keep the water 2 inches above, you let it sit, you have your mash time, your timer goes off after an hour. Well, why is it 60 minutes? Why isn't it 90 minutes? Why isn't it 30 minutes? Right. Or then why do you sparge? Or the, doing the Volrath, the recirculate, try to bring up some clarity and stuff like that. Like, that's, it's a foreign word. It's kind of a weird action where you're just pouring the same liquid back in on top of itself. So I wouldn't say we get questions of like, why am I doing this? I'm getting questions of, what is this doing for my brew? Why does this make it better than just boiling a pot of water on the stovetop sort of thing?
Okay. So, right on. So what are people gravitating to now for the type of ingredients that they're taking? Are they taking like the traditionals like two-row, Pilsner, Minnesota, or are they going for some really crazy stuff?
Two-row is definitely our most popular seller. We have we get Canadian two-row from Alex, Alberta, like a lot of supply shops do. We have a very aggressive price on it for bulk. Now that we have kind of a regular customer base, we do have a number of people that like to buy base grains in bulk. So a lot of our base grains have bulk pricing, and the two-row is very, very aggressively priced, which we want to try and support our customers as best we can. We also carry a new two-row that's grown and malted right here in New Brunswick, just about probably 2 hours from where we are now. We're still testing it a little bit for things like efficiency and sugar content and things like that. The gentleman that's malting it is also very new to the malting process. He's a farmer, but so we carry a lot of that. We're big fans of Maris Otter, so we kind of put that into a lot of recipes and we push that a bit. Of course, the crystals are always going to be good sellers, and we used to sell a ton of dry yeast, but then when we started carrying the escarpment labs, we started bringing in a lot more of that. It's a little bit more of a tricky game as business owners because there's a much shorter shelf life on the liquid stuff. But now that we've probably made probably 6 or 7 orders from escarpment, we've got it dialed in that we know the ones that we can always turn over 2, 3, 4, about 5 bags before the expiration date, and then we always bring in 1 or 2 different ones, maybe a limited edition release or something like that, just to try it out. But Derek does most of our inventory because he's much more familiar with some of the niche grains, things like Golden Promise, brown malt, different things like that. So he's kind of keeps his eye on that, and I just keep pushing the stuff that's kind of a daily seller sort of thing.
Nice. So what are you finding, Derek, that people are taking to not just IPAs, but are they going towards like the darks or the browns or for their beers?
Yeah, it's just like the craft beer market. Like it's very seasonal. So we see a lot of trends like this time of year. People are starting to, turn over to some darker grains, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as running the shop inventory goes, we're always going to have those base grains, which I think are going to be, staples in everyone's household because they make up such a large amount of the grist. But we do find though that we've had pretty good luck with, some of these kind of grains that you can't find everywhere else, like red wheat and stuff like that, which is becoming pretty popular. And even with the hops too, when we bring in some of the obscure items, they've actually been selling pretty good around here. So I would say that probably the more experienced homebrewers are starting to get a little more experimental. They still brew the IPAs probably during the summer, just like everybody else does. But I think during the winter months, like you and me, we're gonna try a Baltic Porter, like something that you're not going to find on the shelf at the liquor store. You're not going to find your local microbrewery doing, because it's it's a big heavy beer and it's something you want to age a little bit and you can enjoy it for years to come. That's what I like about the homebrew game, because we can store this stuff for 5 years and not worry about sitting on it. Whereas if you're a craft beer producer or a macro producer, you're trying to get it on the shelf and get it to your customers.
Get it gone, right? Yeah, because beers, those beers are always better fresh when it comes out of a large tank. I just find on the smaller scale, as long as you're able to keep it somewhere dark and cold, you're golden. And unfortunately for the craft brewers is that their walk-ins, they have to share them not only with kegs but also their cans. So they're limited on space and what they can have unless they have an off-site storage, but then they're paying for it. So then it's dipping into their profits. So I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah. Now, what are you guys enjoying to be making lately? I know you're saying that you have your own setup, so I'm assuming that your setup, other than the Brewzilla, is a propane system. I'm assuming that. So what are you liking more, the propane or the electric?
Well, the electric's very new, and it's we keep our large system at Derek's. He has a garage and he has quite a nice backyard, all fenced in, kind of keeps the wind down. So we do our large brews there for the most part. And the Brewzilla kind of stays with me. I've got young kids and kind of a busy home life, so the convenience of the electric is really appealing to me. So being able to fill it the night before, set the timer, and then when I come home from work the next day, my water's hot, so I can even do like an evening brew if my kids don't have an activity, because in all honesty, my weekends are kind of shot. So I mean, if Derek and I are gonna plan a big brew day, like that's something that it's, especially going into hockey season now, that's like a 2, 3, 4-week endeavor for myself to plan it out. So, but I learned, I only did a few stovetop brews with Derek before we invested in the propane system. So, most of my time is spent on the propane. So, I mean, I guess since I'm really loving this hobby now and I'm loving this business, I think the propane will always have a special place in my heart. But Derek's done a lot more different stuff than I have. So,
yeah, I think it's an age-old debate. You read about it in the brewing magazines, propane versus electric, and you see it every year kind of coming through. I guess the convenience of the electric is definitely something that's, it's something that I like for sure, and Christian obviously enjoys it. But, Christian and I are both outdoor enthusiasts, so I think that's probably why we're both a little bit more, we can be outside in -15 in a snowstorm brewing beer outside, and we're just as happy. You know what I mean? We don't mind. I mean, it causes a lot of issues with our system because there's heat loss and all that kind of stuff, but we still like a brew day outside in the summer, like that's kind of one of our favorite things to do. We just sit and shoot the shit and kind of hang out, and it is a little bit of a longer process. There's a lot of hauling stuff in and out, but I think for me, I prefer the the propane just because it's outside. But I can definitely see the luster of the electric though. Like, I mean, to turn things on and flick a switch and away you go and program things like that would be definitely beneficial as well. So
yeah, I mean, I've only been doing electric since I've gotten back into it, just because in my garage I don't trust myself to have an open flame because I will burn my house down. Because that's me. But I find the electric systems, one, they're easier to control because once you have it set, that's where it stays. And you can have your neoprene sleeve around the outside of it to help maintain temperature. So if you do drop your temperature where you need to, it'll be a gradual descent to where it needs to be, not just, okay, I'm going to crank it down, then all of a sudden your temperature just drops like a rock. Like I'm assuming kind of what it does with propane.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. Most of the time I am.
No, you're not wrong about that one. Especially
Right.
if it's a windy day, and Derek lives pretty close to the water, so we do see pretty significant temperature drops if we just cut the flame. So
yeah, we have a Herms coil for temperature control in our mash, so it's not just freestanding. So we recirculate the water through a tank that's heated, so we don't scorch the bottom of our mash tun, and it just kind of keeps it regulated. So it does control a little bit of the drops and the rises. But like Christian said, you get a windy day out there, you got your flame on your Herms tank going at full blast, and you still can't seem to get the temperature going up if it's super cold out. So
I can contest that. I mean, my wife doesn't let me brew in the house. I wonder why. So my garage is pretty much my brewery, and I'm out there in the winter. I'm brewing away. I'll be out there. I'll sit in the garage and maybe have a little space heater going, or even during the summer. The summers here are a little brutal because they do get up closer to like 32 or 37 degrees Celsius. So it can get a little. Sorry about that. My son was trying to chime in. There we go. So it is. It can be a little challenging, especially when the heat's there. What I find is with electric is that I have to be conscious of what I have plugged in where and when I turn it on. Otherwise, I'm popping circuits on the panel.
Okay.
Which is a downside to electric. And that's where it's a bonus for propane. You don't have to worry about if your power goes out, you can still make your beer.
Yeah.
So which is a bonus. So I mean, there's a plus side to each thing. I mean, one's a lot easier to transport, but you need a supply for power. Another one, it's a little heavier, but you're guaranteed it's going to work all the time.
Yeah. And we like the portability too of the propane as well. Like Christian and I have talked about, we haven't actually done it yet, but going, camping to Mount Carlton, the provincial park, or going to Kushapaquack or something and making a beer there, and just kind of bringing the ingredients with us and kind of letting the wild yeast do its thing when we're done and see what we get out of that, because we both like the foraging aspect and being outdoors too. So that's another benefit to the propane, I guess, that you wouldn't get with the electric. You can do it wherever you want. So
I always think about doing that too, going out to a provincial park, whatever else, bring my like a kettle I could get from a friend, or a keggle, and just and a 5-gallon keg, and use the keg as the fermenter with a spunding valve, and just do everything that way. And that way it's okay. In the car it goes, tie it off, make sure it doesn't flop all over the place like a crazy fish, and then we're good to go. But what are some of the things for new homebrewers do you think they should know?
I think what we try to instill on people is that, quality is where you want to start no matter what. So we take a lot of pride in the ingredients and things like that we bring in to sell to new brewers and experienced brewers. And we take a lot of pride in our loaner gear. So we make sure that it's all kept up to snuff and it's clean and everything. So we try to instill in, especially new customers, to say, like, you really have to plan for your brew day. This isn't something you do while you're trying to play frisbee with your kid in the yard, or while you're, changing the oil in your car or something like that, right? So like, if you're interested in this hobby because you like beer and you like the process of making beer and you want to learn more about it, like, there's a wealth of knowledge to learn, and every little tiny tidbit of information you pick up is going to make your brews that much better. So I guess the big thing for me was that I've talked to some friends that aren't brewers that have kind of asked me questions since we've got into this, and they're like, oh, so you just kind of, boil some water and, throw in some sugar, and then like a few days later you have beer. And it's like, well, no, it doesn't have to be complicated, but it's certainly more complicated than that. So I think the big thing that we try to express on new homebrewers is you really want to make sure that you plan out your day. It's one of the things that we recommend when we give our brew manual to people is like, you need to sit with this the night before, 2 nights before, and look through it, because you don't want to be on step 7 and then realize that you don't have any idea what to do on step 9. So when we have had that, people read through it and then they call us 2 or 3 days beforehand. They're like, well, what's this sparge, or why am I doing this, or what kind of thing. And we get those questions, and that's great, because we're not trying to onboard new customers as one shot. You make a beer, you give it to your buddies, y'all have a good couple laughs. Like, this is a great hobby. I'm a testament that you can find friendship in it, and build friendship, and and learn a lot, and in our case have a business interest as well. So we're not interested in one night stands, and we try to make sure that our customers, we instill that sense of quality and pride on our customers, especially new customers.
Right on. How about you, Derek?
Yeah, so I guess one thing that we talk about a lot too with new customers is, especially when they're looking for, okay, I like this loaner program. Now I want to get into, starting to brew again, or, I used to homebrew in the kits. So I tell them my story like I did to you at the start. Yeah, I used to brew on the stovetop and it always tasted like garbage. So I got out of it.
Yep.
So what do I need to do? So what we try to instill as well is, start small, get the process down first. Once you understand the process, then start looking into, where you want to go with this, because it can get quite expensive. And that's, I guess, one of the big warnings. Like, there's just as much equipment out there as there is, different types of malt. So, you got to narrow down what's going to fit into your lifestyle. And again, we talked about propane versus electric, that kind of thing. But we don't sell a lot of equipment at the store. And the main reason is because there's so much out there. Like, there's the all-in-one systems, which we're just starting to experiment with, which we like. You can buy any size pot you want and get right into it. But we try to convince people to start on a smaller scale and get used to the process before you start to go, shopping for equipment. And because what's going to happen is you're going to end up spending all this money, and then it's going to sit in your garage because you don't know what to do with it. So that's, I guess, one of our key things is to make sure people, keep it realistic. And we try to suit, even the loaner program is suited towards, like a one person brewing system, or maybe have someone to help you out once in a while. But we even say in there, keep your kids out of the kitchen when you're brewing, because there's hot liquids and they're going to be interested. And we make sure that, we want to make sure it's done safely as well. Like, you have to realize there's that trade-off, right? So we try to instill that in people, and especially with, new brewers, it's hard to, because I mean, you can look online, you can buy a spike turnkey system for, like $3,000, but are you ready for that because you brewed one on your stovetop, or do you even know what the process is to get into that style of thing, right?
Yeah, that spike system is just like, it's just utter reach right now. As much as I want that bad boy, there's a lot of rewiring at my house I would have to do. I'm just not quite ready to put 220 into my house just yet. But I totally understand what you're saying about things like cost and things like that, because I do have friends. They're like, oh yeah, it's what it cost you, like what, like $400 or $500. I was like, yeah, $400 or $500 just for one piece of equipment. And they're like, what? So once you start with this, like this, I call it a passion. You sort of go down the rabbit hole pretty damn fast. I mean, then I get the questions, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what I mean is, once you start, let's say, with a Brewzilla, and you have the bucket and a carboy, then you're like, oh, maybe I want some stainless steel, or maybe I want a conical. Oh, maybe I want a glycol chiller. And then it just spirals from there. I mean, I will admit right now, I am looking at maybe getting a Kegland semi-pro canner, or an SS Brewtech, their new mill that they have, that with the 25-pound hopper. It's just that for me, that mill would come in a lot handier than me standing over a plastic bucket with a variable drill, hoping that everything is set properly and going. With this thing, you can actually just set your gap, push the button, you're done.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel your pain though, because literally, but we bought the Brewzilla like I think 3 weeks ago, and then just as pure coincidence, we brought on a new supplier for the shop that we get Brewzilla accessories from just a few days after that, and it was the first thing I did. I was like, oh, I can get a sight glass kit for this, and I can get this kit for that. And it's like, okay, slow down. I just spent $500. I don't need to keep pumping more money into it, but. I also have a lot of respect for some customers that we have that know their process and they have stuck with it because it works for them. So we have a customer that's a fireman and he does brew to bag system. He's
Yep.
placed a number of orders from us. He knows how he likes his crush. If he misses his gravity target, he'll call us up for his next order and say, I want to try this time because I was a little bit under. And can you? So he really, it's a very simplistic brewing system, but it very clearly works for him, and he knows the process inside and out by the conversations we've had with him. So to Derek's point, like, there's a lot of different ways you can do this, but I think key is finding what way works for you.
Right on.
Yeah, and from that example too, like, I mean, you can learn a lot from reading something online instead of buying a $500 or $600 pot to make your brew day more efficient. Maybe that's not even the problem, and we find that a lot with new home brewers, and we're victims of that too. Like, there's certainly equipment that I have laying around here that I'm never going to touch again, just because it's like, oh, I need this, and then I bought the upgrade from that, and now I'm stuck with this thing, which is a piece of equipment that we're not going to need for our system. So it's yeah, I think that's another good piece of advice, I guess, coming out of that is to, with that process, learn it. And, you could do it very simply or you could do it very complex. But, the more or the more brews you do on that system, you can really dial things in and make excellent beer. And really, that's what all the microbreweries are focusing on now. Like, we had this weird made kettle or whatever, and this is how we use it, and it turns beer out really good. So I think that's kind of the, I guess, knowledge-based I guess learning instead of purchasing things from especially first time brewers or people who aren't super experienced. So
absolutely. I mean, I've got people saying, well, I've been to this brewery out by where you live and they have this system called a party guile, which is you can do one kind of like boil or mash and boil, and then from that it can be converted into 4 or 5 different beers into different or is it different. It is a weird ass system. Let's leave it at that, because there's only like maybe a handful of breweries in North America that use this system. It is that weird. And
that's usually the monasteries do that. I think in Belgium, their beers,
yeah. And it's like, well, what do you have that's like that? I said, I have absolutely nothing. I have one kettle, one mash tun, and then maybe 2 or 3 fermenters and a bright tank. That's it. And they're like, but what if you want to make 5 beers at once? Then you got 5 brew days coming at you.
Yeah, that's the best part. 5 brew days. I'll take that any day of the week.
5 brew days and a golf day in there. It's all set. So what else would you guys like to say to everybody? What are some nuggets of wisdom that you want to share?
Oh, that's Derek's department.
Oh, there we go.
Oh man. Yeah, I think we touched on a lot of those highlights already. Keep it simple. One other thing you can do is hook onto someone that's in the hobby. Like, I'm sure you have friends, Dan, that come over and have a million questions, and that's where we've actually, a lot of our loaner stuff has gone out to our friends, and they're trying to make, I want to make a English style beer or something like that. So hook onto someone who knows something about homebrewing and go for the ride. And I know I think you also work at a craft brewery as well. Yeah. So that's another good way. Like, I find around here, especially, I don't know if it's the same way where you are, but in the Maritimes, you can pretty much walk right into the brew house in most places and start asking questions to the brewer, and they'll show you everything you want to know. So, I would say get involved. Join your local brew club. We just we're starting to get more involved with the Canadian Homebrewers Association to try to help them out and get
nice,
not so much more customers, but we like to share experiences and that kind of thing too. Just get involved and ask questions and give us a call or give your local homebrewer a call. There's lots of resources out there, and especially with the internet at our fingertips, and there's tons of good books out there on brewing, that kind of thing. Not so much for home brewing or like starting out home brewing. There's not much on that, but hook on to someone. I would say that would be my biggest piece of advice, to try to get to know the brewing and learn your processes before you go and spend all your money.
Absolutely. Just to touch on what you were saying about the craft brewers. Where I work, I wouldn't have gotten back into it if it wasn't for my boss, who just let me bend his ear as much as I could, asking as many questions as I could to get inspired again, and which led me down the rabbit hole in investing almost my life savings into what I have. But to anybody out there that's listening, honestly, if you have a craft brewery that's close to you, if you go in and ask for maybe to see the back, 9 times out of 10, the brewer will come out, bring you to the back, and then you can just chew his ear off. And I'll guarantee you, dollars to donuts, they'll tell you everything you need to know. There's nothing hiding in this community. So with that said, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always nice to talk to guys from down home. It's been a long time since I've been there. So hopefully when things calm down, I'll be making my way back home probably maybe next summer, and I'll pop in, and maybe I'll bring some beers with me that I've made, and we can sit back, kick back, and shoot the shit a little bit.
Yeah, we love that for sure.
All right, boys. Well, everybody, this was Derek and Christian from the Community Brew Shop down home in New Brunswick. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. And this is Dan and the boys from the Community Brew Shop. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dan. Cheers.